Thank you, Undersecretary. I'm going to turn to Mr. West and let him open up for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, also Ranking Member, and thanks for the panel for being here. And this is an issue that's very near and dear to my heart, having spent 22 years in the United States military and also being on the HASC and also being on this Small Business Committee. First of all, let me say that I did vote for the Budget Control Act of 2011. I did not believe that the super committee nor this thing about sequester was a good idea, but people always talk about compromise and reaching across the aisle, so that's what I did. And so now I'm here to talk about how do we resolve this. When I continue to hear about taxes increased, we have to understand that if we increase taxes just on those top two tax brackets, you're only talking about $85 billion of new revenue per year. And when you look at our net interest on the debt, that means you will only fund that for 10 days. Federal government has a spending problem. We spend $4 billion a day, $4 billion a day. So when I look at this sequestration, while we're here talking about it, I want to give you the numbers from the congressional district that I represent in Florida's 22. Total small businesses jobs lost due to sequestration. The estimation is 35,626. Total small business contract amount lost due to sequestration, 60,983,639. Total contract amount lost somewhere about 80 million. This is a big deal for us. We have places like Pratt Whitney. The first question I'd like to ask is, when we look at what is happening as far as the loss of these contracts, are we taking into account that there may be some type of legal ramifications to these contracts being terminated that the Department of Defense will have to then pay for? You're going to have an additional cost because of this, correct?
I think we'd endeavor to minimize that, because it would not be our intention to, if it was avoidable, to terminate contracts. Rather, we would try and if we have within the scope of the contract the ability to buy, say, 10% less, we would probably do so. And we would have to scrutinize new contracts. The contracts we're already in, if the money's obligated and on the contract before January, would not be affected. So I can't say it's not possible, and I'd ask Mr. Jim to amplify, but it would not be our intent to go reopen contracts if it's avoidable.
The vast majority of our contracts are fully funded, fully obligated, dollars obligated on them at award. There are a few, particularly in the R&D world, that are incrementally funded, but for product, fully funded. The sequestration reduces our budget authority. So from an existing, and what that says is I have less money to spend going forward. There's no need for me to terminate an existing contract unless the product that was going to be delivered was now not needed into the future. But if the product continues to be needed, there's really no need for me to terminate it. What I need to do is to adjust my spending on a go-forward basis.
So if on the 2nd of January, this thing is not staved off, anything that goes into calendar year next year, if it's already the contract that's been awarded, there will be no effects on that contract.
If I may, I'll do it in two parts. For contracts that were awarded with FY12 current money or prior, I really don't think there will be an impact. If I have a contract that was awarded in FY13, since sequestration affects all of what goes into the denominator is all of the FY13 budget. If I put a service contract in place with equal spend and I spend through the first 3 months at that level, I would need to find a way through the last 9 months of the fiscal year to, in fact, spend less on that contract.
Now, with that being the case, then, the unpredictability for the workforce that is out there, one of the things that concern me when you look at the WARN Act, the Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act, a lot of these notifications would probably need to start going out sometime November at the latest December for a 2nd January kick-in. Of course, the Department of Labor sent out a recommendation that a lot of these businesses in the defense industrial base do not have to adhere to the law. Do you think that that would set them up for potential lawsuits down the road if they did not adhere to the WARN Act?
The first thing I want to say is the Department, I think, has been the Secretary, the Deputy have met with industry leaders, and I think they've been clear. I'm going to try and restate what they've said, that we can't be in the position of providing legal advice as the Department of Defense to corporations about their own relationships with their own unions and workforce.
I understand, but the Department of Labor,
right.
which is also, I mean, is there no coordination between the DOD and the DOL for what they just sent out? I mean, I think that it can be setting up, you know, a lot of people that service the DOD for a really big pitfall if they're not careful.
Well, the Department of Labor does have a responsibility and was speaking for the executive branch and so we are deferring to them on that guidance. And I understand that not all corporations are satisfied with the Department of Labor's position, but they are the person and they are the entity in the lead for us on that.
If I could ask one more question, Mr. Chairman, if I could. Yes. The key thing that I want to ask, do you think that if sequestration kicks in with our industrial base, especially manufacturing, the aerospace, the shipbuilding and things of that nature, even weapons and armament, will we be able to restart these industries down the road, or will we maybe lose a technological and innovative advantage at some point?
The Manufacturing and Industrial Base Policy Office within AT&L has been and continues to pay a great deal of attention to the industrial base. They call it a sector-by-sector and tier-by-tier analysis, looking expressly at very low levels, what are the exact technologies and capabilities that we need. When we find that one is threatened, then we take action to attempt to protect it. We will continue, that office will continue to do the analysis to ensure from an industrial-based perspective for the key technologies that we need, that we are looking to find ways to, in fact, protect them.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Ranking Member Alaska.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. McCord, as of September 6, Undersecretary Kendall was stating that he expected DOD accounts to take an 11% cut. However, the report released by OMB last week projected at most 10% decrease in funding. To what do you attribute that the difference in the projected cuts?
Well, I guess I can't be sure where Mr. Kendall got his, all of us prior to the report coming out were using approximate numbers. It was common to say 10%, 11%. Two things. First of all, we in the department tend to think almost exclusively in terms of relationship to the budget that we submitted and calculate differences from what our plan to do was in 13. And the sequester report that OMB did was not done that way. It was compared to the CR. Second, as Mr. Jinman was describing with respect to 13, the amount of reduction across the entire 12 months is 9.4%, but if you kind of look at the last 9 months, you would come with a figure close to what Mr. Kendall was using if you look at how you have to get that money out of less than a full year.
Okay, thank you. Small businesses do not have the resources that larger companies do, such as Lockheed Martin or Boeing, and they will not have the money to have the lobbyists to fight to keep their contracts. Given this inequality, how can you assure us and small businesses that their contracts will not be the first one on the chopping block?
So I think the best answer I can give, what we buy is what we need for our warfighters. If there is something that we don't need, that will be what we stop spending on first. It's not going to be, I need to protect large business or I need to protect small business. It will be, I need to meet the requirements of the warfighter.
Well,
so we'll make our prioritization decisions based on what warfighters need.
Well, one of the requirements are for DOD to comply with the 23% contracting goal for small businesses. And traditionally, you have had issues and problems not achieving those goals. I just want to make sure that if sequestration takes place, that there is a level playing field that would allow for small businesses to have a shot at the door.
If I could just amplify on one point, though, that there is, if anything, perhaps too much of a level playing field, because we are not going to have a great deal of discretion. We are going to endeavor to do exactly what Mr. Jinman said, to do the things that our warfighters need the most, and that was when I, in my opening statement, referred to protecting the funding for the troops in Afghanistan as a top priority. But the law is going to limit our flexibility, especially in the procurement accounts. So we may not be able to go even as far as we would want to buy what we need. And so some levelness of playing field is enforced upon us by the rigidity of sequester, for good or for ill.
What it will mean in terms of readiness and capabilities if small businesses are no longer there to provide the products and services that are necessary for our military? Because sequestration could very well threaten some of these small businesses.
From a sequestration perspective and our policies with small business, virtually no policy in the department that we have with the requirements to award to small business will change. There's nothing in the sequestration law that would cause us to do that. We will continue to have the same emphasis to award to small businesses. We'll continue to have the requirement to do the market research. If there are two small businesses capable of doing the work, we will continue to set aside the work for small business.
Okay. As you know, in this committee, we have discussed so much throughout so many hearings the impact of contract bundling. And it continues to be a prevalent problem government-wide, preventing many small businesses from competing in the federal marketplace. With the acquisition workforce likely impacted by these cuts, what measures will DOD take to ensure that this impediment to small business participation does not grow?
The first thing I'd say is that the acquisition workforce, again, kind of getting back to the rigidity of sequester, we recognize the importance of it, and we would not want to have it take a disproportionate hit, but there's probably no part of the workforce that can be totally exempt, so it's going to have to be part of the balancing that everyone participates in if sequester happens. That said, I think that with respect to our workforce and our civilian workforce in particular, that we would probably be strongly inclined toward looking at furloughs as opposed to RIFs. So the people, we're not going to try and, if it's possible, I think it's not in our interest. It's not helpful to us to divest workers, but we may need to go with furloughs. So I think that we're not going to lose the expertise, although we're probably going to lose some work years out of this.
Mm-hmm. And let me just ask you, as we continue to work toward a solution to prevent sequestration, there are a lot of people that says that there should not be any cuts to defense spending. With our country facing historic deficits, shouldn't all agencies, including DOD, make sacrifices and not let all the cuts, the burden, fall on social programming?
Well, I think that's the principle embodied both in the Budget Control Act and really in the backup sequestration, took that approach. And
thank you.